How's everybody doing? I'm Kenneth Townsend, and I chair the Public Events Committee, which helps organize some of these Friday events. We're honored to have a really special program today. We are going to hear from some incredible investigative journalists here in just a few minutes, but what I want to do is just spend a couple of seconds explaining what these Bill Miner Awards are, and then I'm going to spend about a minute, or not even a minute, introducing our moderator, and then we're going to get really started with the meat of the program. So, in 2003, donors established the Bill Miner Journalism Prize through the Community Foundation of Greater Jackson, which is now the Community Foundation for Mississippi. To honor Mr. Miner's long career, recipients of the prize are selected from winners of the Best General News and Best Investigative and In-Depth Reporting categories of the Mississippi Press Association's annual Better Newspaper contest. The four winners of the Miner Prize are presented with a generous cash awards administered through the Community Foundation. And the Mississippi Press Association expresses deep appreciation to the Bill Miner Journalism Prize Fund of the Community Foundation and the fund's advisors and founders who wish to remain anonymous at present for this generous contribution in support of excellence in reporting by Mississippi journalists. I also want to briefly acknowledge Lane Bruce from the Mississippi Press Association, without whom this would not be possible. He has done great work convening this, and thanks, Lane, for all that you have done. Now, in just a second, I'm going to hand it over to David Hampton. Many of you, no doubt, know David Hampton. He's an adjunct professor of communications at Jackson State, a communications consultant, and a freelance writer. And as most everybody here knows, he spent many years as editorial director at the Clarion Ledger before retiring in 2012. We're really excited about this program. I'm looking forward to hearing more about some of the stories that merited these awards, as well as from the panelists talking about their general reflections on the role of journalism in present. So without any further ado, I want to hand it on over to David, and I think he's going to introduce the panelists and invite them up on the stage. Welcome, everybody.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here with this group. It's an honor to be participating in this event for any activity named after Bill Miner. Many of us were fortunate enough to know and to be around Bill as he practiced journalism in Mississippi for 60 plus years, maybe more. I don't get this discussion get too far along without acknowledging Bill and the impact on Mississippi journalism that he had and continues to have with his legacy and this award named for him. Bill never let up to the end. Bill never let up, even in his failing health. He was always curious. He was always questioning, always analyzing, always investigating at some level on stories big and small. He kept up even after his health slowed him down. He was a newspaperman to the end. I was editorial director at the Clarion Ledger, and Bill and I would talk frequently about columns I ran and the editorial positions we took, especially if he disagreed with us, he would always call. After Hurricane Katrina, the newspaper supported Governor Haley Barbour's proposal to use federal money to redo the port of Gulfport. And it was controversial, and the Clarion Ledger supported him in that. We didn't support Haley Barbour on a lot of things, but we thought that was a good idea. That would be a good thing to do. But we agreed with him, and then we thought the economic development aspect was important. And Bill immediately called me and told me we were wrong, and gave me hell about it. So this went on for several weeks. In the end, the port plan was a disaster. It didn't work. It was poorly done. It took away from housing efforts. After some good reporting by the Coast paper, a few lawsuits, and a federal investigation, it was officially determined that it was a bad idea. I was on vacation that week in the Coast when that report came out. The phone rang in the condo, which the phone never rings in the condo. I picked it up, and it was Bill Miner. First thing he said was, "I told you so." He found me and ran me down just to talk about it, and then he went on to talk about it for a long time. But I love Bill. But that dogged interest and tenacity, insatiable curiosity, questioning, suspicious of those in power. Bill was attacked. He was criticized. We talk about the attacks on the press now. Bill Bill has been there and done that, but he never backed up and he kept on going to the end. And so in this age of the ongoing attacks on the media, we need to be reminded and to double down on the Bill Miner tenacity in our journalism. And that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about some good journalism in Mississippi and look at some of the stories that won the prize for that he's named, that carries his name. Let me introduce the participants today. Susan Montgomery, and y'all can come on up to the
Shall I go ahead?
yeah. Anyway.
I don't seem to be able to go without a bunch of stuff.
Susan is a Memphis native.
Would you help me a little closer?
I'm sorry. Susan is a Memphis native who landed in Greenwood in 1975 because John Emmerich hired her as a summer intern. 3 months turned out to be not long enough, so she returned to Greenwood after graduating from Rhodes College. She spent most of her professional and personal life in that community that she finds endlessly fascinating. At the paper, she has worked in jobs ranging from darkroom assistant, city editor, advertising sales representative. She retired in 2014, but she didn't stop writing, reporting, and editing. And these days, she is the on-call editor, in other words, a temp. In fact, she tells us she has to get back to the paper this afternoon. So, and on the side, Susan and I actually began our journalism careers together as copy boys at the Commercial Appeal in Memphis. They changed the name to Copy Clerk when she was the first female copy clerk at the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, which was a fascinating and wonderful job in the old days of hot type and people smoking and cussing and throwing things in the newsroom and writing great stories. So I wouldn't trade it for anything. Jason Patterson is the editor and publisher of the Yazoo Herald, his hometown newspaper. He's active in the community and currently serves as president of the Yazoo County Chamber of Commerce. Before joining the Yazoo Herald in 2006, he served as managing editor of the Bolivar Commercial in Cleveland. He's married to Jamie Patterson, who serves as the Herald's managing editor. She won the Bill Miner Award for General News Reporting last year, and they won the Bill Miner Award for in-depth investigative coverage together in 2011. They have 3 children, James, Elsie, and Jason Jr., and she's mad because he's bigger this year. So she's coming back. Michael Simmons is the associate publisher and editor of the Madison County Journal, position he has held since February 2012. Michael hails from the Mississippi Delta and previously worked as general assistant reporter at the Bolivar Commercial before becoming the first editor of the Cleveland Current. He graduated from the University of Mississippi with degrees in journalism and political science. Lives in Madison with his wife and 3 children. Michael previously won the Miner Prize for investigative reporting in 2015. Anna Wolf writes about poverty and economic justice for Mississippi Today, an online nonprofit news site. She's a fellow health coverage fellowship sponsored by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Massachusetts. Anna previously served as health watchdog reporter for Mississippi statewide newspaper The Clarion Ledger, where she covered health and healthcare access, wrote an award-winning series on hunger, and most recently launched an in-depth investigation on medical billing. And if you did not read that, go back and read it. It's good, and especially when you get your medical bills. Wolf graduated from Mississippi State University in 2014 and is originally from Tacoma, Washington. So welcome panel. Am I on here? Is it working? Okay, great. We're going to look at these stories, and I would like for the panel just to go down the line and talk about their story and why they did it, how it came about, some things, the reaction to it, and what they learned from it. So let's start with Susan from Greenwood comment on facing deportation. The judges for this piece called it good reporting and writing, putting a national issue in perspective with the local face, to which it makes an important story as well reported. And This is an ongoing story. This brought it home to Greenwood, and it's a very moving story, I thought. Susan, tell us about it.
Thank you, David. You wanted to know why I decided to do this story? I got a call from Tim Caleb saying, will you do that story? It is this series of stories were all breaking news. This was not an investigative report where we had an idea and we would go examine it and bring something hidden to light. But as it turned out, as general news, it did the same thing. In April of 2017, if I'm correct, April 10th, ICE agents surrounded the house of a Greenwood couple and their 5 children, about just a block and a half back from my house. In a very brutal way, kind of halfway arrested the father, who wasn't there at the time, terrorized his wife, and in the course of 6 weeks, the government evicted 4 American citizens who were their children, and two undocumented workers, and one of their children who was not born in the United States. They had been allowed to stay here under the guidance of ICE and by an immigration judge. Even though he had evicted them, he had told ICE to use their prosecutorial discretion. This man was a pillar of St. Francis Catholic Church. He served on their parish board. He donated to everything. His children were in school. His oldest daughter was going to was enrolled in our local regular private school the next year. They were totally integrated in our community, and the government forced them out of it. We got lots of questions about it. Is that good enough?
Michael, we'll talk about your piece, which from this community, everyone knows about this story of the young child who was abducted in the back seat of a car that was hijacked or stolen, and the perpetrators allegedly killed him. And it's an ongoing story now, but he covered it very closely. And the judges wrote, I found myself on the verge of tears reading the description of the little boy's makeshift memorial. The entire report is peppered with incredible descriptive writing. This report really moved me, a rarity in journalism today, and it's true. It was a moving piece, and his story followed throughout and continues. So tell us about it.
Well, as David said, if you live in this community, then last year your phone blew up with Amber Alert warnings, probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. I want to say we got 20 or 30 of them. You know, at some point people were just trying to figure out what was going on. Got to work that morning. It was a Thursday, so our paper was out. And I got an email from Warren Strain, communications person with the Department of Public Safety. It said, the Amber Alert is canceled. Contact Jackson Police Department for any questions. And so at that point I knew something was off, because usually he says the child has been found safe or something like that. It being in Hinds County and Jackson, we rarely cover anything outside of Madison County that doesn't, it's not some sort of metro regional area. So I was just being the curious reporter. I called Warren and I said, hey, is there something wrong with your email, or is there, he said, you might want to make some phone calls. And it turned out that the car was found in Gluckstadt, close to the alcohol beverage control warehouse. And so it was a Jackson-Hinds County incident that now has come into Madison County. So my day that I had planned and was going to spend doing everything else, I ended up going out to the scene, and from there it was just, I mean, it was heartbreaking for me because I now have 3 small children, and you know, seeing what had happened, finding out what had happened. And so we just started following it, making phone calls, and we found out there were so many Madison County connections to this case with some of the alleged criminals. Some have now pled guilty, but just continue to follow that trail. And then, you know, we're a weekly, so our next paper came out a week after this, and so we try to have a second day lead, something that's different than, so it's, you know, and so we really dug into Kingston and kind of his life, and talked to some of his family members. We were able to tell a little bit about Kingston at the same time. But this was I think I wrote several stories on this, several in-depth pieces about the suspects and things like that. But,
Again, it was such a horrible crime, but the description, the coverage of it really was important on this. Anna did an in-depth piece on food insecurity, which has been an ongoing story in Mississippi for centuries. But the important thing was bringing it home today and making it real, and taking a story that there's a tendency in Mississippi to take issues that are so overwhelming that we just put them in a box and put them somewhere and don't really look at them. But to bring this up and to do this piece on it was very important. The judges said from top to bottom there was intense competition in this category that showcases some fine Mississippi journalism. This entry focuses on an important topic, spells out the problem very well in the first part, and finishes with a focus on solutions. Not enough series go that far. Exceptional reporting, clear, concise writing. This is the best of the best. Tell us about it, man.
Thank you. So my story didn't arise out of any particular event or like news. I had just taken over the beat of healthcare, and I was trying to find different ways to tell health stories. You know, what impacts people's health the most. Quickly realized that obviously anything that you put in your body is going to dictate your health. So was looking at some stats on food insecurity, which is sort of it's a USDA term that's not very clear, but it's really just a measurement of hunger. And I guess like I wasn't very aware of how great an issue hunger is in Mississippi. You know, there are people skipping meals all over the country, but you know, in the poorest state, obviously that's happening as well. So, and I really wanted to sort of get personal stories. So I traveled to the poorest county in Mississippi, which is Holmes County, and talked to people at the grocery store and the corner store, you know, about what they were eating and where they get their food. I'm sorry,
Is it mine?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
that's okay. So, and quickly realized that, you know, there are a lot of different factors that dictate what people eat and their ability to get food. Transportation is a big one, obviously in a rural place. We talk a lot about food deserts, which is, you know, your proximity to a grocery store. And I didn't really focus on that as much because I feel like in my research, your proximity to a grocery store isn't necessarily the biggest factor. Even just education about what sorts of foods to buy and your resources to buy them is a greater barrier. So, so just exploring that issue and then getting to sort of the solutions piece, talking to local farmers about you know, the food that they grow locally and getting that into the grocery store, using food stamps, being able to purchase locally grown food with food stamps, which is something that we're moving towards. And at the end of the day, I wrote several stories on this topic, and I think like the last line in one of the last stories was that there's different ways of approaching this, and we can talk a lot about food and how it's grown and you know how we get food to people. But at the end of the day, poverty policies will fix food, and that was the big takeaway.
Thank you. Sorry. Jason's going to tell us about his piece in the Yazoo Herald. The judges said, excellent story, the writing is compelling, it makes it personal, it also got results, well done. And that's one thing we'll talk about is the results from these pieces, but it had a lot of photography with it, but what struck me about this piece was the description. Good writing description that you could see the problem and it made you mad. So tell us that.
I'll say that I was actually very surprised that I won the award because Jamie had written a story about a student that was disabled and was not getting services that he needed in school, and the article had actually resolved that problem. And she had another story about a grieving mother whose son had overdosed on opioid drugs that sparked a revolution in our community with a lot of groups getting together. And I thought I had a third place finish at best with this story, but it was a story that it was very tragic to me, and so I did. I think that probably affected how I wrote it, but it was one of those stories that just really sort of fell in my lap. Glenwood Cemetery in Yazoo City is a very large historic cemetery, and Jamie and I go there sometimes just for a moment of peace. When the newspaper gets too crazy, we'll take a drive through there. It's a cemetery that it attracts a lot of visitors because Willie Morris is buried there, and the legendary Witch of Yazoo City that he wrote about in his Good Old Boy novel, her grave is there, and it's kind of a tourist attraction for Yazoo City. There's a lot of visitors, and one day we were just driving through the cemetery, and we noticed, looking out in the woods, that there appeared to be some gravestones, and that sparked curiosity. And then at the same time, I just happened to overhear the cemetery section make some mention of it, just in a passing conversation. That's what inspired me to look further into it, and so I just basically walked out into this very heavily overgrown area and started finding all of these graves that had just, obviously were once very well maintained. There were benches, these were nice monuments. And there were also some out there that were obviously poor people that, they just had the little metal nameplates that had faded to where you couldn't even see who the names were anymore. So it just kind of, it was very tragic to me, and I explored it further, and the mayor told me that everybody was blaming it for good reason on previous administrations because it had been several decades of neglect. I think most of the graves that were out there were 30s and 40s era, but it did, and it's something that we will likely follow up on, because although at first everybody was really motivated and wanting to fix the problem, that they kind of lost their zeal for it after when there wasn't any more coverage of it.
I thought we would talk about these pieces and about Mississippi journalism in general a little bit, about what we need to be doing. All these pieces were on important topics for the communities that you cover at work. Oh, okay. What kind of when you were writing this, Anna, what did you want to accomplish? What do you want the reader to come away with? And although you didn't express opinion in this piece, what did you want to happen from this?
Yeah,
so I mean, anytime that you decide to go after a story like this, you want to uncover something. I feel like I didn't really uncover anything. This is stuff that's happening in front of our eyes every day. People going hungry, that is. But I just wanted to sort of put a face on it, and that's why I opened up with, a person's story. The young woman that I spoke with was named Alicia, and she had just gone to the grocery store when I met with her for the first time in 6 months, and just kind of actually getting into, her life and her circumstances, and logistically, like, what it takes to get food where she is. And not just actually getting food, buying food, and putting it, in your house, but, for months she was without running water. At one point her lights were off, so she couldn't cook food during that time, and couldn't store it, didn't have a refrigerator. So I feel like I just wanted to sort of let people know that there are all these different, peripheral factors that play a role in someone's inability to be, to eat nutritious foods.
Susan, your piece on immigration, again, just basically it didn't express opinion, it didn't get into deep policy issues of immigration, but it told a real story about real people who were being impacted by that. What kind of feedback did you get, and what do you think you accomplished in the community doing that?
Well, as he's right, I did not come at this piece as a story that I wanted to, I didn't want to change anything in particular. I didn't have a goal that way or an opinion that way. I just wanted to tell their story. But their story was so upsetting to everyone across the board. And what happened was, in a small town, if you go to the grocery store, you know a lot of people in that store, and they'll stop you in the parking lot, or you'll be someplace else, you'll be at church or whatever, and people who thought they understood where they stood on the immigration crisis questioned that. And that's what I got from them. They wanted to know why he hadn't fixed his situation a long time ago. Well, and my story said this, he tried for years to get legal, and went to great effort to do that. So it wasn't something that he was ignoring or sneaking around. It wasn't getting done. And they were touched by this, and they went home thinking about it.
Michael, your piece, we all write about crime. It just dominates local television. It gets to the point that we tune it out. It gets to the point that you get cynical about it. But yet we have a crime like that, you have a chance to really talk about impact. How do you think the media does with crime coverage, and did this teach you anything about that and change your impressions about it?
I mean, the old saying, if it bleeds, it leads, and that's I think that's been the, crime stories or what. People want to know who was arrested, people want to know what happened, and so to me, that's the easy, it's easy to, okay, there was a shooting here, so I could put a blurb out about it. And in this case, it would have been easy to say a 6-year-old was kidnapped and murdered and found in Madison County, and gone about covering other things, honestly. But we, even though we don't cover Jackson as much, we still we believe that as Jackson goes, the suburbs go as well, and Jackson has to be strong, and we really, we want Jackson to succeed in every sense of the word, and so with this instance, we wanted, to really evoke some, I guess maybe some emotion, or just let people in Madison County know this wasn't just another statistic, this wasn't just another crime, this was a 6-year-old boy preparing for his kindergarten graduation. And it really did move it sparked so much discussion in Madison County. I mean, you had everyone from the sheriff and others raising money for funeral costs. So it really tied the two communities together. And so, again, it could easily just been news at 6, one more shot and wherever. So.
Good point. Jason, as was pointed out, he's won this award before, his wife's won this award. You see the tradition at the Yazoo Herald of doing stories that impact their community. And I think they have a good thumb on that of what stories are important and how to do it. But that's not easy to do. That's not easy to do for a newspaper this size and with the resources. How can you do investigative work and cover the board meetings and cover the crime and take time to do the extra stuff that you do? What's the lesson for journalism in Mississippi from what you encounter as a publisher of a smaller town newspaper?
Truthfully, the biggest thing I have going for me is that Jamie Patterson is my wife, because a newspaper like ours could not have somebody of her caliber. We probably couldn't afford her if she wasn't married to me. But outside of that, I mean, I wish that I had a simple answer to that. We work long hours, and we, sometimes we put the kids to bed and get the laptops out in the living room. It's certainly not easy, and it seems like it's a lot harder now than it was 10 years ago. But we have changed our philosophy to, technology has helped a lot in that some of your things like your school news and your church news that you have to have, it's a lot easier now to ask somebody to take a photo and send it to you, rather than you actually having to be physically present for things that may not be as important in the grand scheme of things. They're very important to a community newspaper, but your presence is not necessarily required. But we spend a lot of time planning and setting our priorities. And investigative stuff is particularly hard. Jamie has been working on a story involving our housing authority, which that sounds pretty boring, but she's uncovered a lot of things, and her reporting has led to that whole board being replaced. But it took a tremendous amount of her time filing Freedom of Information requests, poring over budgets and financial documents, and some of that stuff's not easy, particularly when you're dealing with government type documents. They're not as easy to read as a business financial. But it's not easy, and you really have to be committed to it. But we both love what we do, and I think that in a community newspaper, when you really get to see it when you do something that makes a difference, and it's so gratifying that it inspires you to want to keep doing that level of work.
Well said. Thank you. Anna has just left the Clarion Ledger and now is gone to report for Mississippi Today, which is a digital online news site. Anna, tell us about a little bit about what you do now and the concept of Mississippi Today, and how you think that has impacted journalism, not just that, but the move to more digital journalism.
So I moved to Mississippi Today to report specifically on poverty. My title is investigative reporter, but I'm going to be doing a lot of the same stories that I was doing at the Ledger, related to issues that low-income people face. Mississippi Today is all online, and I feel like our role is to sort of fill the gaps. So, we're not like technically a daily newspaper. We can spend a little bit more time. We have a lot of flexibility because we don't have to put out a print product to do the longer story, the more in-depth story, spend more time on it, develop sources. So I think we're going to play a pretty an important role in sort of the future of journalism here in Mississippi. And certainly there are similar models in other states cropping up, and it's going to be really exciting to see where it goes.
The rest of you all have digital part of what you do. How does it change what you do? What kind of opportunities does it provide for you for reporting?
I can speak to that. At the Greenwood Commonwealth, what it has allowed us to do is to publish breaking news as soon as it's happening. And that is important to us, and we think to our readers. We think that look, I'm a feature writer, okay? But we think that hard news is what our readers really want. And I'm not talking just about crime news, I'm talking about a decision made about the future of our hospital, for example, which has been an issue in our community. So, let's say a decision is made when we're not publishing, which there are a couple of days we're not publishing. Then we can always report it, and we like that. It's not about just kind of having a cool internet presence.
I think what she's saying too is particularly help papers like ours. We're twice a week, and we're not a daily paper, so there's really a void on important breaking news. And we probably were slow to the game, realizing the power of that. But we've continued to build on that success, because the real challenge with it is that no matter obviously your journalism is the most important thing, but it has to make if you can't pay the bills, you can't have good journalism. So the challenge has been finding ways to make it profitable.
I will say that in Greenwood and Yazoo City, they don't face the competition, the media competition. I guess we've got news stations with helicopters and the Clarion Ledger and Mississippi Today, I guess, in our backyard as well. So when it comes to something breaking news, especially crime driven or something like that, we have to be able to put something out. And so, it may not be as in depth as we wanted to, but that's when we can follow up in the paper and really have that second day lead. So we have to stay on our toes, because we get messages all the time. There was someone ran into a school bus yesterday in Madison. Someone sent us a Facebook and it was like, when are you going to have something online about the car that hit the rear end of the school bus? And I was driving to Philadelphia and I called the fire chief and he said there were no injuries, nothing to it. So I was like, okay, well, apparently online, everyone thinks it was this massive pileup, but things like that. So we just we use it to stay on our toes, basically.
As I was getting ready to come to this today, I was watching, probably most of you were CNN or Fox or whatever you watch, but the arrest of the suspected bomber who sent bombs to public officials, to former presidents, and CNN and the media. So these attacks, we were talking about hostility at this session last year, the hostility toward the media, in today's political environment and how it impacts the work of journalism today, or if it does impact the work. And I just want to get an impression of this panel to talk about how things changed as the climate of the hostility and the hyper-partisanship and criticism of the media. Does it impact your work here in Mississippi, and what's your opinion of the situation? I'm gonna take that. Anna?
Yeah, well, the fake news rhetoric has certainly touched us all in the media. Can I just read what Trump said at this rally that the suspect was at? I also want to speak to you without the filter of fake news. The dishonest media which has published one false story after another with no sources, even though they pretend they have them, they make them up in many cases. They just don't want to report the truth, and they've been calling us wrong now for 2 years. That definitely affects us. We have ethics in journalism. There's no police, but the public can hold us accountable. But just being challenged in this manner is, I think, really dangerous.
What about Mississippi? Is it impacting us?
And I think our leaders in Mississippi have sort of taken on this tone as well in some cases.
The fake news.
Yeah.
Anybody else? You get angry calls?
Of course, we do that. But I don't think that it has affected us personally as much. We do get some, but we've always had irate people. I remember when Haley Barber was from Yazoo City, and the first time that I wrote an editorial that was critical of him, I had some very angry people come in and cancel their subscriptions, and unfortunately their wives came back and renewed them. But I've taken this, the way that I've personally chosen to respond is, it's sort of invigorated me. It's made me just want to raise the level of the standard of what I do. I think that what we do has value, and I think that it's our responsibility to prove that.
What, these were all in stories that impacted your individual communities and even wider. What are some that everyone has stories in their pocket that I wish I could do that? I wish I had time to do that. This issue is very important in Mississippi. Why is nobody writing that? Tell me some of your pocket stories. What are some of the things that Mississippi journalists should be doing right now that we're not doing so well?
That might be a question for the audience.
Yeah, I agree with her. What do you think?
Throw it out to y'all. Okay. Yes, sir.
Releasing strongly reported in the media, in my opinion, the decline of local businesses in Mississippi.
Decline of local businesses.
What I mean by that is how local businesses are facing way more extreme competition from Amazon and Walmart, and the effects that it has on the
Disruption. That's a hard story to write, and
Yeah, I think too often we think of those as national stories that, we don't have to tell, but certainly those have impacts on Mississippi, and we should be doing a better job of telling those stories.
Well, it has impacts on all of you.
Major impacts.
Well, I'll tell you that one major obstacle with that is finding a business owner that is willing to say, yeah, my business is not doing well, until that out of business sign is on the door. No one's business is bad until, people have a lot of pride in Mississippi and don't want to say that things are tough. So it's a good story. It should be pursued. I'm just saying it's a big obstacle right there.
yes, ma'am.
John is right. That's a good story. And it could be a series. And the problem that you're talking about, no one will talk to you about it, probably could be overcome if they trust you, all right? There's a problem with they would want to go off the record, which I don't do, not very much. But yeah, he's right, and it ought to be a series.
Any others? I'm trying to mine some story ideas here.
I want to ask a question. Are we through with that?
Yeah.
Is it Susan?
Yes, sir.
And I think 3 of you own your publication, say. 2 of you own your publication.
Our owner of some of our publications is sitting right there.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I want to ask about the business. I would say 20, 25 years ago, the Clarion Ledger classified ads were 20 to 25 pages. And today it's 1. Craigslist is decimated the classified ad section. What was that like at that point in time, and how much of a can you give us some sense of the financial impact of the loss of classified ads?
I can speak only in general about it. You know it better than I.
I'll say that you take a paper like the Clarion Ledger, and it affected them much worse than a paper like mine in Kansas City, because for us that was always a relatively small source of revenue anyway. But that's a huge, and your auto advertising, real estate advertising, a lot of that stuff is moved. In our own community, the major challenges that we have faced were like what John was talking about. You know, Walmart came to Yazoo City a year or so ago, and our grocery store closed, and that was by far our biggest advertiser. And you know, some of the other small Main Street businesses have closed, and these were all businesses that were big supporters of the newspaper. You know, some even had the mentality that that it was worth supporting the newspaper, you know, even above what they may have thought they were getting in return, because of the fact that a good community has a strong newspaper.
And Lloyd Gray, who used to be with the Northeast, what's the name of the paper?
Daily Journal.
Yeah, Daily Journal. Said to me one day that their biggest competition, this was 3 years ago when he was there, was Facebook. So is Facebook a big competitor, would you say?
It has changed everything, because everybody at least thinks that they're a reporter. That's one of the things that's very frustrating to me personally, is when you see numerous erroneous accounts of something that's happened on Facebook, or you know, the people, at least in my experience, that are the most claim to be the most knowledgeable on social media, usually their facts are wrong, and that is, it's frustrating, and you have to just sort of you just have to let some of that go, because you could waste a lot of your productive time you know, trying to respond to every misinformed person that's out there. But it also it makes the news agencies, it does make things more competitive, where you know, for us, the Jackson television market has never really been that big of a factor, because they were only going to come to Yazoo City if there was a sensational murder or something like that. But now they can get a press release from the sheriff's department, and they can put it on social media right away, and that has created additional pressure on us to you know, to have breaking news, whereas as a weekly newspaper, that wasn't always as big of a priority for us.
From an advertising perspective, I think that's one of the biggest obstacles to overcome is when you, because I do I write and sell ads as well. Have to do a little bit of everything, clean the office floor, whatever needs to be done. And I have a list of people that say, we don't need to do any advertising other than Facebook. And then, I have a list of people that have been out of business because they believe that that is all they need to do to survive. And it is, I mean, it is that's our job as an industry now, is to help educate and work with clients and businesses on marketing strategies in this digital age, because at the end of the day, we need that store in town. We need them employing people. We need them paying taxes. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. So having to, but you'll always have those people that say, I don't need to do anything, I have a Facebook. And then 6 months later, they don't even have a Facebook. So,
Or business.
or business.
Any other questions?
I love the message that as goes Jackson, so goes the suburbs. But I gotta tell you, I live in Madison, and I have never felt a more insular feel to the community than what I feel in Madison right now. How can that story be made and driven to the public consciousness? Because if the city crumbles, there are no suburbs to thrive. I
think it is, that's where we need the help of the state newspaper. I think it's, that task in and of itself is a little too big for our weekly paper to handle. I hate to say but it's our job to help, tell the positive stories of Jackson and what things are going on. Because you're right, there's a mentality. Some people would love to build a brick wall down County Line Road, and and they don't realize that we've got and so we've tried to start incorporating things and put stories about things that are going on, even if it's events, if it's the arts, if it's things like that. Encouraging people to to come to Jackson. So but to help that message, it's it's a lot more work than we're able to do. I have to say. So,
But it is important to have media leadership on that. I think that is an important issue. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious how much today, I was born and raised in Jackson, lived in New York for the last 30 years. I know growing up, the editorial, who the newspaper supported for a candidate carried a lot of weight. I think it still does in New York. There are so many, as you're talking about, I grew up here in pre-internet years, but how much voice you feel like you have through your various news sources in this upcoming election. I think I got by now 7 copies from New York friends about a New York Times article about that. Speak today in the New York Times, and we were at the 2 museums, like on Wednesday when he was there with Clinton, the big fundraiser, and they thought, why aren't they here? Talking about voting, how important it is to vote, even if it's not who to vote for, but how important it is to get out and vote this coming election. What's your role today, or your newspaper's role, or whatever your media sources, like with your Mississippi Today? Do you think people are paying more attention to Facebook, or how significant do you feel like your voice is in this upcoming election?
I feel like among people who are the most likely to vote are very likely to be, informed people are likely to be our audience.
So, what about all those others who we need to get in to vote? Who are they listening to? Or, I mean, it's still most places in this country, the percentage of voters is quite low. So, what is the news source or sources that we need to have those who may be?
since you're Mississippi Today is doggedly nonpartisan, so we'll let her take this question. What's your approach to political coverage and your impression of it?
Right, so I just started at Mississippi Today, but I can say that, we're doing a lot on the election, profiles, that kind of thing, trying to write a different story about who these people are so that they can get a better sense for who they're voting for when they go to the polls. We just had this like 2-part series of very long profile on Cindy Hyde-Smith. So I feel like that's one thing that we're trying to do to tell a better story about who these people are. We don't do editorials at my publication, so we're not endorsing anyone or anything like that. And I feel like my contribution to the political coverage leading up to the election has been surrounding other issues related to voting, so not the candidates, but like I just did a long series on or story on the poll location closures that have taken place over the last 5 years. About 5% of our poll locations have closed since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. I spent yesterday at Stewpot actually talking to people there about whether they're going to vote. I don't know that anyone has ever gone to Stewpot to talk to people about voting because we write these folks off. We write certain folks off as non-participatory. Low-income folks are who I'm talking about. For the most part, they are less likely to vote. So when you talk about our low voter participation, we are the poorest state in the country. There is a correlation there. And it's really difficult, and I've been talking to some advocacy groups about how you stress that to folks who don't feel like they're being spoken to right now. Politicians, for the most part, are not speaking to the day-to-day issues that low-income people are facing in Mississippi. So why would they go vote for these folks who are not speaking to their issues? So, like I said, I'm working on a story about that right now. Other than that, I don't know I'm not really sure what our role is for encouraging people to vote other than just trying to tell those stories. Did that answer the question?
No, it was great, because there was one thing a college student was saying during the Q&A after this, that she and a lot of other of her friends feel disenfranchised, and more so now than even in the past, and how can we get you in? So I think it's great you went to Stewpot. Like I said, not so much who to vote for, but that your vote matters.
Right.
Did your poll pick up any more voter intensity interest last time?
Yeah, so we just asked about our poll we do with Chisholm Strategies, and maybe Trader maybe in here. We in the last series of results that we released a few weeks ago, we found a couple of things. One, that Mississippians were looking for more compromise among their elected officials, that they were put off by the tone of politics. The president was looking for more civility in politics. And as far as the level of interest in the upcoming election, it was so-so. It wasn't especially strong. The midterm elections, I feel like it's going to get more traction this time around than maybe some midterm elections get. It's sometimes hard to compare, of course, from year to year, at least on a national scale. It's not as clear right now that in Mississippi the voter enthusiasm is as high as it is perhaps in some other places around the country. But I guess we'll see in a week and a half.
I would surprise me. Are there other questions? So I wanted to sort of wrap this up. Just tell me why you do what you do. Tell me your passion for this profession that we love. What's something that's happened to you, or something that you see, or something that you experience every day when you wake up? Let's talk about journalism and why you love it.
I had zero intention to be a journalist when I was in school. I majored in journalism and political science with I was going to law school. I had a job in DC lined up, family friend, so it was, wasn't merit based, I'll say that. And I graduated at Ole Miss and studied for the LSAT and everything, and I had a lot of friends that went to, that were lawyers at the time, and they said, you're ready for law school, you're gonna spend 3 years reading and writing. And I said, I don't wanna do that. So I went back to Cleveland, where I'm from, and went to the Bolivar Commercial because I was told I had to get a job, and so that was my degree, so let's do this. Fast forward, and I spend all my time reading and writing, except I don't get those fun billable hours. But I love it because every day is a new day. You never know what is in store that day. You never know if you get to tell a story that will change someone's life. One of my favorite subjects I get to talk about, not as much now, but I did in the Delta. I love to tell Make-A-Wish stories, and it's for me that really it hits home. But that's huge for a child to tell their story and to then not only tell it, but then for the family to have that forever. So things like that are what I feel rewarded with. So.
My path was kind of like his. I was about to get an English degree and realized that I didn't know what I would do with it. So I tried journalism and I fell in love with it. And I think the main thing about it for me is that I cannot think of any other way that I could better use the talents that God gave me. I'm good at telling stories and listening to people and making things that's communicating. That's just one of the few things that I do well. So I can't think of anything I could do that would be more satisfying than that. It would certainly probably be a lot easier to go write PR releases that nobody reads or something like that. But I think I would be bored out of my mind. I really do genuinely enjoy this business. I love the fact that you never know what's going to happen. We have, some days are just typical small town days, and some days crazy things happen. But it's always exciting, and I love dealing with people, and I get a tremendous sense of satisfaction when our newspaper is able to solve a problem in our community.
I feel similarly. I also feel like being a journalist just helps me understand the world better. So it's definitely, part of my own development, I think. Being able to talk to all different kinds of people that I would never have met otherwise, other than, that it's my profession to get out of my comfort zone and talk to all these different people. I've met the most amazing characters through the course of these last few years doing this job. And I think like all of us do have a heart for justice, and we feel like, truth telling is our way to make the world better. That's really cheesy, but you know what I mean. I think we all have that inclination, and that's why we do what we do.
I agree with Anna. Truth telling is what drives us. But I have some personal reasons for it beyond that. I was just scratching them down. I'm just enormously curious. I want to know if you go to a really boring board meeting, I just decide to be curious about it. And then all of a sudden, all kinds of things open up. I like that. And I don't know of another job that allows that quite in that way. The other thing is there is a synergy about it that feeds me. I like being in a newsroom. I like interacting with the people that I'm covering. It's bolstering to be, as much as it will drain you, it will also fill you back up.
Very good.
for what you do. As the last time, we had a similar panel like this a few months ago, and one of the participants, they got a letter in the mail the next week of someone who subscribed to their paper. Because it's important. So this is an advertisement. Subscribe to your local print and digital media. Journalism needs your support, and it's important, and what these people do is important, and we appreciate you being here.